Okay. So we were just talking about Fourth Amendment search and seizure, and I was talking about the expectation of privacy that you have in certain areas, right? You don't have a high expectation of privacy in your trash can, for instance. So let me give you some hypotheticals, some quick ones. So inside your home or apartment, what would you think your expectation of privacy would be? High, right? So they would need a warrant to search your home or your apartment, right? What if you were homeless and you're living in a tent? Do you have a high expectation of privacy in that tent? Yeah, you do. So even if you're just in the middle of the street or in a park in your tent, the police can't search your tent because that is your home. That is your high expectation of privacy. Now, there's going to be gray lines, right? What if you're living in kind of an open cardboard box where you can see through the sides? Maybe a lesser expectation of privacy, right? Um, what if you are driving down the road and you get into a huge car crash and people are like taking pictures of the car crash? Um, can the police use those pictures or take those pictures in some way? Is that a search of your privacy? And the answer is no, it's not a search. You're in public, right? If everyone can see it, it's you have no expectation of privacy. Um, Closed containers usually mean you got a high expectation of privacy in them. So, like a backpack that's zipped up, they're going to need a warrant to search that backpack, right? What if you are going through an airport, though, with that backpack? Then your expectation of privacy is much lower, right? Even though it's your sealed container, your backpack, you're going through customs, right? You're going through the x-ray machines. They're going to scan the inside. They're going to search it if they detect something or feel something weird. So your expectation of privacy is a lot lower. You can't object to a search at an airport, right? Um, what about a package in the US mail if you're mailing something? Generally you've got a high expectation. If it's a first class, letter, they're not going to be able to open that up and read the contents of the letter. It's like the phone call, right? The contents you've got a high expectation of privacy in. Except there are security things, right? They don't want to be shipping bombs or, anthrax or something, right? So if they detect something strange from the outside of the package, like it's leaking something or it's making ticking sounds, um, they can then open that package, right? So kind of security concerns will trump your expectation of privacy and things you mail. Um, but things on a cell phone, right, are going to be private. So any text messages, pictures, unless, just like with your luggage, you're going across a border, immigrations and customs officials can theoretically search your phone for things that are of danger to America, right? Um, I already talked about the third party doctrine. So it used to be that because you gave your data to a third party, like the cell phone company, the government could just track your location, right? But courts have been cracking down on that in recent years. I gave you the example of giving your bank records to a bank, but there was actually a financial privacy law that was passed in the mid 80s, I think, that basically said, you know what, the third party doctrine doesn't apply to banks anymore. Once you give your information to banks, they can't then just hand it over to the government, even though you have no standing to object to what they do. I'll talk about standing in a second. Um, what about your pockets as you're walking down the street? What's your expectation? Pretty high, right? That no one's going to be able to look into your pockets, except the Terry stop thing that I talked about last time. If there's a reasonable suspicion that you're about to commit a crime or you're engaged in criminal activities, they can stop you briefly for questioning and pat you down theoretically for weapons, but sometimes they find things that aren't weapons. And you can argue in court that it was a bad search if it's clearly wasn't any sort of weapon and they were clearly just looking for, your bag of cocaine. But they can also argue that finding the bag of cocaine was just a coincidence as they searched for, you know, a gun of some sort. Um, there is an area around your house called the curtilage. Um, and curtilage is spelled Curtilage, right? Because your house, you've got a very high level of privacy interest in your house, right? And so there's this kind of area, like if you have a fence around your house or bushes around your house, um, police are not going to be able to look in even in your yard because it's fenced off, right? It's you're kind of claiming this is part of my house. Now, let's say you have many acres of land, right? But you only have the fence or the bushes right around your house. Courts have allowed police officers to go onto your cornfields and search those without a warrant. Even though it's technically your property, you've got a lower expectation of privacy in things that aren't part of your curtilage, part of your immediate living area, right? So open fields, an empty lot you might own, even a barn that's on your property but it's far away from your house. Um, those kind of things, often courts will allow police to search without a warrant because it's not part of your castle, right? It's not your fenced in area. Some places where you feel you would have a high expectation of privacy, like your office where you've got business documents and things, bank documents, diaries, maybe. Those things you think you have a high expectation of privacy in, but sometimes there's exceptions where there's inspections by I don't know IRS officers or whoever, right? Where they've got kind of regulatory things where they've got to come and look in your business for health and safety purposes or whatever it is. And those people are allowed to be there. And if they're allowed to be there, they're allowed to kind of see the things they see, if that makes sense, right? Um, what about personal characteristics? Things like fingerprints, blood, saliva, handwriting, um, voice exemplars to like see if your voice compares a voice on a tape or something. Um, the Supreme Court says that you do not have an absolute privacy in these things. So if the police are allowed to be there and do what they're doing without a warrant, then they can collect these kind of samples like fingerprints or even saliva, right? There was a great case a few years ago where there was this guy. He was pulled over. This is in Los Angeles, and he was suspected of burglarizing a bunch of homes in the area and leaving DNA evidence at these burglary sites, like hairs and things. Well, the cops pulled this guy over. They had kind of a DUI station where they were pulling everyone over, and they asked everyone, including the person they suspected of being the burglar, to do a breathalyzer test. And the guy consented because you kind of have to. You did the breathalyzer test, and they kept the mouthpiece of it, and they did a DNA test, and it matched all the crimes in the area, and they went and arrested the guy. And he was saying like, you illegally searched me. You illegally got my saliva from this breathalyzer test without a warrant. And the court said no, they were allowed to be there. They were allowed to do breathalyzer tests. Just because they also tested it for DNA is not a search. Under the Fourth Amendment, they're allowed to do that. Right? So same thing with like fingerprints or handwriting samples, right? So if you've got to sign a form, they can compare that signature to something, the ransom note or something, right? Okay, let me talk about standing. So standing is a really big issue in the law. And it's basically, do you have a right to sue on a violation of one of these things, right? Can you suppress the evidence that was found under this illegal Fourth Amendment search? Um, and sometimes you don't have standing to object. So let's say you're at your friend's house, you guys are all doing drugs, it's a gun party, you're swapping illegal guns, whatever. You're doing real bad illegal things. The police knock on the door. The friend says, "Oh yeah, you can come on in," and they come in. Even if, let's say the friend didn't say that, they just came in and they violated the friend's, rights, and they find all of your guns and your drugs in this friend's house. Um, can you sue to suppress this information? Can you make a motion to suppress this illegal search? And technically, you can't, right? The friend has to, because it's not your place that has an expectation of privacy, right? You don't have expectations of privacy in someone else's house, right? So, especially if they gave consent, there's almost nothing you can do to suppress that evidence. Same thing happens in illegal automobile searches, right? Where the you're a passenger and the person gets pulled over and says, yeah, you can search the car, and they search everything in the car, including the things that are in your purse. um, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't give permission. Your friend did. You've got no expectation of privacy in your friend's car. So I guess in my last 10 seconds, word to the wise, if you're going to do crimes, do it in your own house and your own car. All right, we'll stop there for now.